Welcome to Not Suitable for Democracy. I'm your host, Nick, and today we're going to cover three news stories. First, Zohran Mamdani's victory election for New York City mayor and the start of his transition from mayor-elect to when he's sworn in on January 1st. Next, we're going to celebrate the Supreme Court's vote in favor of same-sex marriage. Can you believe that? It is wild that they were actually going to vote in favor. We did predict this outcome back in episode 22, so check that out when you have time. But here we are, and we're going to talk about that journey to what got us here today. And lastly, in some not-so-good news, we'll cover the Senate Democrats, the 7 Democrats and 1 independent who voted to end the shutdown while sacrificing any leverage they had over the Affordable Care Act subsidies that have already expired and will now cause premiums to go up for over 20 million Americans, anywhere from hundreds, if not thousands of dollars per month. So if you can believe that, again, this is under the leadership of Chuck Schumer, Senator of New York. He is behind all of this, and we are going to talk all about what is happening. So let's jump into some good news with Zohran Mamdani's victory election right here in New York City. Before we jump into it, I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much for tuning in, supporting the show, and for those of you who I've gotten to connect with, for the feedback. I truly appreciate it. It makes this so stronger. It makes me a better podcaster. And at the end of the day, I hope you all learn something. And hey, if you want to learn more, make sure to subscribe to Not Suitable for Democracy on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Don't forget to follow along on Instagram and TikTok. Our channels are growing. It's exciting to see. Even our latest videos have over thousands of views now. So please follow along. I use the same handle for both. And you can follow me at NSFD_pod. Congratulations to Zohran Mamdani, who won the election for New York City mayor. Now, this was an unbelievable feat. Remember, going from 0 or 1% in the primary election to winning the Democratic primary and then winning in the general election with 50.4% of the vote, meaning Zohran won a majority of the votes in New York City. On top of that, he won with over 1 million votes, something that has not been done since 1969. Now, we know that second place, or the loser, was Andrew Cuomo, but here's a fun fact. Andrew Cuomo lost to Zohran Mamdani, 41% to 50%. And back in 1977, when Andrew's dad, Mario Cuomo, ran against Ed Koch for mayor, Andrew Cuomo's dad, Mario Cuomo, lost that election too. He lost with 41% of the vote. Ed Koch, who went on to become mayor, he won with 50% of the vote. So both like father, like son, they both lost with 41% of the vote to a better Democrat who wound up winning 50% of the vote. A majority of the vote. Look at that. History repeated itself, basically saying New York City does not want a Cuomo for mayor. Never did, never will. All right, so now, right before we talk about their transition, I do want to share one more interesting fact that I found about the election. We always talk about the power of someone's message, and we talked about Zohran's message on this podcast several times, so we know what the message is. But let's talk about how effective the message was. And we have the numbers to back it up. So, got to give a shout out to the city. The City is an independent journalism publication that has a lot of focus on New York City politics. They've been around for several years, and they've been doing really, really good work. They're independent, so they don't lean Democratic, they don't lean Republican, though at the end of the day, they do really good work covering the Democratic politics in this Democratic majority-led city. So they did an article based on the cost per vote between Zohran Mamdani and Andrew Cuomo. Cuomo wound up raising $55 million. Now, he spent that the last leg of the race. We know he came in second place. He earned 854,995 votes. So the cost per vote comes to $65 per vote. $65 per one vote. So that's actually pretty high. what was that compared to Zohran? Now, Zohran Mamdani's campaign, very cost effective. They were able to raise over $16 million thanks to the Working Families Party. A lot of that money went toward ads, promoting Zohran Mamdani, or attacking Andrew Cuomo. At the end of the day, we know Zohran won with over 1 million votes. And that vote count came to 1,036,051 votes. So over 1 million. Now, the cost per vote for Zohran Mamdani, and remember, Cuomo's was $65 per vote. Zohran Mamdani's cost per vote, $15.81. So that is a 4-to-1 ratio, meaning Cuomo's votes were 4 times more expensive than Zohran Mamdani's because his message was that much weaker. Think about it. The fact that Zohran was able to get his message out with less money, but also because it resonated. People talked about it. People supported it. People came out to vote for it. $15.81 per vote for over 1 million votes compared to former Governor Cuomo. Yeah, $65 a pop. Not worth it. And by the way, I do have a video about this on TikTok and Instagram, so you can check it out there. And remember to follow at NSFD_pod. So now we know the power of Zohran's message. And now, what about his transition? Well, the day after Zohran won the election, he already announced his transition team. Now, every candidate who wins the election for New York City mayor has a transition team, especially for higher offices as well, because this is how they're able to select people who will be able to work in their administration that will align with their values, that are looking to fight for the campaign promises and deliver on them, but most importantly, be able to serve the people of New York City under the direction of the candidate, and in this case, Zohran Mamdani. So Zohran announced on the very first day 5 women who will be leading the transition team. Now, I'm very excited about these picks because they are all very qualified, they all have great experience, and most importantly, they are sending a message on not only do they align with Zohran's values, but they are going to be making some really good picks for people all across all different sectors of government. So this gives me a lot of confidence that Zohran's team will be some of the best. And they are Alana Leopold, Maria Springer-Torres, Grace Bonilla, Melissa Hartzog, and my personal favorite, Lina Khan. Now, while all these women have had great years of experience in executive positions or leadership roles, and they've also been, even one of them in the former administration for mayor, they all will have the insight needed in order to make these selections for leading the different agencies that make up New York City government. Now, Lina Khan is one of my favorites because she's a millennial and she's doing phenomenal work. She was actually the former chair of the Federal Trades Commission appointed by former President Biden. So, now granted, we know how Biden governed like a moderate, but Lina Khan was one of the best picks where she really made it her mission to take on corruption, antitrust, and really focus on the laws that would break up the big tech oligarchy, but also the mergers that were happening, like these corporate consolidations, not only of money, but as of power. So, but Lina Khan, as like a young woman in like head of the FTC, unafraid, and she went there. So there were so many good instances where she actually has Mark Zuckerberg, who does not like her. She has many billionaires, really angry at her. But even better is that she has fans on the left, but then also fans on the right. She has even said how she's gotten letters from traditional conservatives and people who, had voted for Republican presidents for most of their lives, but they are so happy with the work that Lina Khan was doing as FTC chair. So now that Zohran Mamdani is bringing her into the fold, to be a part of his transition team, right? So like Lina Khan, what made her so great was that not only was she so masterful of the law and the mechanics, the technical mechanics of policy, it's not exactly dazzling work, it's not exactly the sexy part of government, but knowledge is power. right? And Lena Khan knows that. So if you can really understand the rules and the protocols and the processes, you can really leverage them to your advantage. And she's even stated she is looking to look at all the rules and all the laws on the books to really fully understand the power of the role of mayor, but also so that Zohran has different avenues to really leverage that power and make sure that Zohran can deliver for the people. From New York City to Washington, D.C., we have great news where the Supreme Court voted in favor of same-sex marriage. Now, that is something that most people weren't expecting. Now, believe it or not, we talked about this situation on our podcast back in October, episode 22. You can check it out sometime, episode 22, where we discuss how marriage equality could remain in place. Fast forward, well, today proved us right. Marriage equality is the law of the land. It's been on the books for over 10 years now, and we are looking forward to keeping it that way. So, I know there was a lot of fear and anxiety, especially within the LGBTQI plus community, with the fear that the Supreme Court would bring this petition all the way to a full hearing and then eventually overturning same-sex marriage. Now, we're not in the clear yet in terms of overturning same-sex marriage because we know that conservatives will find different mechanisms and rules to finagle in order to start chipping away at our rights. But as of today, we are safe and sound because Kim Davis's petition was rejected. So, for some quick background here, let's put it this way. If you have the time, I'd love for you to check out episode 22 from our podcast, where we talk about how we got here, Kim Davis, what her mission was, and basically why this case wasn't going to hold up in court. So just for some quick background, Kim Davis is ordered to pay $360,000 to the same-sex couple. Now, of course, that's a big chunk of change for someone whose job is just the Rowan County clerk, and someone who did spend 5 days in jail. Not exactly a real winner, put it that way. So, with all that said, Kim Davis was looking to get out of paying, right? It's a lot of money for anyone, but she had no interest in paying the same-sex couple. So what she did, on January 30th, 2025, just this year, she filed an appeal in the 6th Circuit Court of Appeals. Kim Davis was appealing this lower court's ruling, saying, now wait a minute, this $360,000, that's a lot of money, I'm not going to pay it. But it's not like she was really saying, she can't afford it. I mean, I'm sure she can't. But she was really saying, I'm not going to pay this because she truly believed that same-sex marriage was unconstitutional. She can't really pick and choose what laws she follows. That's not how it works at all. And put it this way, she's still fighting to get out of paying. So it wasn't until June of this year that the 6th Circuit Court flatly rejected Kim Davis's appeal. They basically took one look and were like, nope, not doing it, no thanks, this is not what we're going to sign up for. So they're still going to order her to pay the $360,000. Then on July 24th, 2025, this is when Kim Davis, more like Karen Davis, like a typical Karen, she winds up then filing a petition to the Supreme Court, literally calling the manager to tell the lower court to reverse their decision. And that is what truly this whole petition was about. It was never actually about overturning same-sex marriage. If you read the petition and you actually hear her argument, she actually is quoted as saying she believes same-sex marriage was wrong when the ruling was given, and it was wrong when Obergefell was ruled, and it was also wrong before Obergefell became law of the land. So it's basically her own personal moral beliefs that she thinks same-sex marriage is wrong, so that she shouldn't have to pay the money. That's essentially what she's saying in her petition to the Supreme Court of the United States. So Karen being Karen, she called the manager, and all 9 justices had to then answer to Karen Davis over here. So that's where we're at. Fortunately, okay, so this process, right? Break it down real quick. Kim Davis filed a petition. So with this cert petition, it would require 3 things to happen. 1, there is a clerk who represents 7 of the justices. Okay, one clerk. Now, justices' offices, I should say. And this one clerk would have to review the petition and then write a memorandum and then suggest to the other justices, like, hey, is this worth our time? Yes or no? These are my findings from the petition. These are my notes. That's requirement number 1. Requirement number 2, in this particular case, the justices actually ordered a response to the petition. They wanted a response from those two, since those two are actually called out in the petition, right? So the Supreme Court wanted a response for them. At first, David Armhold and David Moore waived the response. They're like, we don't got time for this. We don't want more money, more time with her. We're over and done with her. Supreme Court's like, no, you have to file a response. At first, it was supposed to be September 8th. That they then asked for an extension, which was granted by the Supreme Court, giving them until October 8th to then file the response to their petition. That was requirement number 2, which they did. Requirement number 3, you get the response to the petition, the original petition, the office clerk from 7 of the justices review. Well, the other 2 justices, in this case, it was Samuel Alito and Neil Gorsuch, they had to actually review the petitions themselves. And because of that, they would then have to determine, like, is this worth the other justices reading? So it's kind of like the office clerk gave the cliff notes, but then Neil Gorsuch and Samuel Alito had to read the petition themselves and make their own decision. So from that point on, right, the way this went down is like, yes, between Neil Gorsuch, Samuel Alito, and the office clerk, they all determined, like, yes, we do need to review this petition. Let's put it up for a vote. So that's why on November 7th, right, or at least between October and November 7th, we saw the headlines like, Supreme Court might overturn, Supreme Court's taking up the case, all because of this petition, which was part of standard procedure. So basically, these 3 folks, the office clerk, Neil Gorsuch, Samuel Alito, had to then decide, do we put this up for a vote? And they decided yes. Now, for context, we remember that we know that there's a 6-3 conservative majority on the Supreme Court. So yes, it's most likely that the justices would want to overturn same-sex marriage. However, based on the way this ruling was brought down originally, and because there is legal precedent with Obergefell, but more so, if it was overturned, this would cause a lot of havoc within the bureaucracy of same-sex couples, especially families who adopted, but also with interracial marriage. Because remember, the Respect for Marriage Act, which protects same-sex marriage and interracial marriage, would cause a lot of damage throughout the bureaucracy of it all. So the Supreme Court justices also knew they need to protect the institution. If they don't protect the institution, there's a really good chance that people would not see, that a lot of people would discredit the Supreme Court and not find their ruling as worthy. So in this case, they knew that they couldn't just let this petition by Kim Davis, based on her own moral belief, dictate the ruling from the previous Supreme Court justices. So it was kind of like, will Kim Davis's opinion trump or supersede the opinions of 9 Supreme Court justices? And in this particular case, they reviewed the petitions and deliberated on November 7th. So I don't know how many hours they deliberated for, but with that said, they had time to think about it between November 7th, 8th, and 9th. And then finally, they announced their decision on Monday, November 10th, that they would reject Kim Davis's petition. And this is why we have to keep having these conversations, organized with our communities, because at the end of the day, there are 1,388 rules, laws, and protections that are afforded to same-sex couples with having same-sex marriage legalized. So that's over 1,000 rights that people can miss out on, and I don't think that's fair. So if you don't think that's fair either, then please make sure to get the word out, and we must fight for marriage equality. And last but not least, the Senate Democrats. This has been such a disappointment, such a damper after good news from Zohran Mamdani's election, from Democrats winning races all around the country. Like, you just can never win, and especially with Senate Democrats who keep dropping the ball. So what happened this time? Well, Senate Democrats have been, trying to hold out and keep the government shut down as a negotiation tactic because that was their only leverage that they had being in the minority. We know that Republicans control the House of Representatives, the Senate, and the White House. So this is one of those few opportunities where Senate Democrats could withhold their vote to open the government from the shutdown in order to gain concessions, right? I'm not going to give you what you want unless you give me what I want. And what did Senate Democrats want? Well, originally they wanted to fund the Affordable Care Act subsidies that had expired earlier this year. And because the subsidies expired, right, healthcare premiums would increase. It's hundreds or thousands of dollars, not per year, but per month. Tuesday's elections just showed that Democrats won on a message of affordability and rejecting Trump. But what did Senate Democrats do? They failed to fund the Affordable Care Act subsidies, and they caved to Trump. So this is literally the worst possible scenario that you can get out of it, because despite those 40 days of the government being shut down, Democrats got nothing in return. So it's like, why did you even shut down the government for 40 days if you got literally nothing 40 days later? You could have just opened the government from day one. It wouldn't have been an issue because you got the same end result. The only thing you got different was more people angry, more people upset. Sure, you got more people angry at Republicans because they blamed them for the shutdown. But after this, you just lost all goodwill from your Democratic base. So, oh yeah, and that's another thing too. The fact that Senate Democrats were so proud that what they got in return for giving up the ACA subsidies, they got a date to vote on the subsidies. So no promise on the actual subsidies, but just a date to vote on it. Because Chuck Schumer thinks, aha, if I get it on record that they're going to vote no on the ACA subsidies, this will make them look really bad. Well, guess what? The Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, already released to the public. He already announced, I am making no promises to vote on ACA subsidy bills. So the fact that even at the House level, this will not pass because Mike Johnson will not bring it to the floor means that the entire negotiation tactic from Chuck Schumer and the Senate Democrats and Angus King were just so flimsy and weak that it won't even achieve their actual goal. So all 8 of them who do their press conference and think they're defending democracy and doing a good job by opening the government while failing their own negotiation tactic. This is just so disappointing, so disparaging, and just so infuriating, right? Like, that is not suitable for democracy. It just shows that Chuck Schumer, who is the Democratic minority leader of the Senate Democratic Caucus, does not know how to govern in 2025. He was elected to the Senate in 1998. Okay, so like when Britney Spears was coming on the scene, Chuck Schumer was just getting elected to the Senate. That's the level of how far back this goes, okay? And it also shows how out of touch he is, because I don't think he even knows who Britney Spears is, right? Chuck Schumer miscalculated is that this will cost Democrats winning back the Senate in 2026. All they need are to pick up 4 seats, which they actually could do if they were popular and they were making moves that would prove to the American people that they're delivering on their agenda. Like, for instance, North Carolina, purple state, they could win that. We even know with Graham Plattner running in Maine, he could win Susan Collins' seat. We also know with Ohio, I think Senator Sherrod Brown, former Senator Sherrod Brown, I think he's running back for a seat again. And then last but not least, we know that if Democrats really try hard and really find a great candidate for Texas, I think John Corbin is like up for re-election. There is so much potential to find a great candidate. And we know that based on demographics, like Texas is like purplish these days. It's not like solid red anymore. So there is a really good chance that Democrats, if they played their cards right, did everything amazingly, like they could flip Texas blue in the Senate and they could actually pick up 4 seats. Like between North Carolina, Ohio, Texas, and Maine, there is opportunity to pick up Senate seats. Like there is. But the fact that Chuck Schumer keeps having Senate Democrats like just play their cards so wrong. They're not looking like they're fighting. They're not running on a cohesive message. It's like he doesn't understand that all these moves will build up and they will actually cost the party trust. They will cost the party votes. Because put it this way, like when the Senate keeps making these bad moves that make people upset, what's the motivation to vote for them? Like Democrats don't get it. It's not that we're going to vote for Democrats because Trump and Republicans equals bad. It's like, well, what are you doing for us that makes Democrats equals good? If you're giving me nothing, I'm going to stay home. I mean, I'm not going to vote for Chuck Schumer again, but for everyone else, like, yeah, there's no motivation to vote for a Senate Democrat other than we're not Republicans. But when they vote like Republicans and they have horrible message and they keep caving to corporate power and interest, it's like, you really are useless. You are spending our taxpayer dollars against our will in ways that hurt us financially, economically, and even as a party as a whole. So it's like the worst case scenario. Like they wasted 40 days of our time while still getting paid to get zero concessions while they could have kept the government open and got the same results 40 days later. That's how bad Chuck Schumer's leadership is in the Senate. Chuck Schumer needs to resign. And what's even worse is that I see Hakeem Jeffries, who is the leader of the Democratic caucus in the House, is saying that Chuck Schumer should not be replaced, and he thinks he is doing good leadership. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like Hakeem Jeffries really thinks that Chuck Schumer is a good leader after all that. Well, I really hope Chi Osei primaries Hakeem Jeffries. I do have some reservations based on the district that is probably more moderate than Chi Osei's core base. But hey, anything can happen. I'm open to it. So at the end of the day, Chuck Schumer needs to resign. Both Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer need a good primary challenge. And if Democrats can start changing their negotiation tactics and start actually fighting back in a way that earns the American people's trust, then maybe they can pick up the 4 seats like I called out in North Carolina, Ohio, Texas, and Maine. But it's going to take a lot of coordination, a lot of organizing power, and not even from the Democratic establishment because they're not going to work the way we want. We're going to have to do this ourselves. It can be done. It's been done before, and now is the time to do it. And that's our show. Thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode. If you like what you heard and want to learn more, then make sure to subscribe to Not Suitable for Democracy on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Or you can always follow along for more news and content on Instagram and TikTok. I use the same handle for both, so you can follow along at NSFD_pod. Now stay tuned for more updates for Zohran Mamdani and his transition to become New York City's mayor, for any interesting rulings coming out of the Supreme Court, and, of course, hopefully we make progress in the Senate, one way or another, whether they actually start waking up or we start primarying all of them. And always remember, democracy is not suitable without you.